Good afternoon and welcome to Women in the News, our Georgia Win List webinar series. I'm Melita Easters, Executive Director and Founding Chair of Georgia Win List. Today's program is number 17 in our 2021 series. Earlier this week, we had our first in-person event since last spring's COVID precautions. The occasion was a gathering for current Win Leadership Academy class members and alumni at Manuel's Tavern. We gathered for a hybrid event which featured a Zoom conversation with former Emily's List president Stephanie Schriock, whose book, Run to Win, Lessons in Leadership for Women Changing the World, serves as the textbook for the 2021 Win Leadership Academy. Some of the 50 class members joined us in person for welcomes by our board chair, Laura Register, and WLA coordinator, Rachel Pauley. We had several candidates among the group who really enjoyed working the room. Others joined us via Zoom. We are so thrilled to have many women who are training to help us finish the job of turning Georgia blue in 2022. Emily's List was founded in 1985 and became highly successful in electing women to the United States Senate and House. The Win List founders who first gathered in my living room in 1999 were inspired by the Emily's List model, and over the years, the two groups have worked together to train, recruit, elect, and re-elect the women who now serve in the Georgia General Assembly as Democrats. For the past 11 years, Stephanie Schriock served as president of Emily's List, and during her tenure, the group added millions of members to its online community, raised more than $475 million, and endorsed more than 1,800 women, with 1,000 of them winning. More than 14,000 women have been trained to run for office during her tenure, and staff grew from 40 to 120. Our webinar today provides you with a slightly edited version of the conversation our WLA class members enjoyed Tuesday evening. We experienced a few technical glitches and begin your program with Stephanie's response to my questions about key qualities women leaders need.
What is really, really important as you think about what you're going to do moving forward, whether it is running for office or helping a woman run for office, or even just in leadership itself. I always say, know what's driving you. We need folks with integrity. We also need folks who are willing to listen to what's going on, to understand their community. We need people who are willing to ask the right questions. And you can read through the book what we're talking about here, but like these jobs are hard in every aspect, and we have to bring our full selves into these roles. And so you have to think about what that means and ask yourself the right questions to get to that place. And sometimes that means you don't go right now. Maybe you wait a little bit. Maybe you do go now, even though it's a little bit harder, but you build out your support, and I can talk about that as well. But honesty and authenticity and really bringing your full self into this is really the most important thing. It's also kind of can be the hardest thing to do, because I think particularly for us women, let's face it, we don't all like to talk about ourselves as much as some of our male friends do. I mean, I'm right here. And so we have to really push ourselves out there and be willing to share our story, because our stories connect everybody together.
A failure to be willing to learn can be fatal to a campaign. Stephanie explains why it is so important to always learn more.
This is so important, and it is, I would argue, it is good for all of us to remember this as a central aspect of our lives. Like, if we're not learning, if we're not expanding ourselves and trying to get better and better at what we do and every aspect of our lives, then we're not living. So I like to say, like, we need to keep learning. And if you think that you know everything about running for office, I'm going to tell you, you don't. Because I still don't know everything about running for office. It changes, the community changes, the technology changes, and you have to bring people around you, whether they are in paid capacities or in volunteer capacities, who can help with this. You don't need to know everything about running for office, just like I didn't need to know everything about being the president of a multi-million dollar organization. I'll tell you what, I need to ask the hard questions, figure out what I knew and what I didn't, get people around me and listen and be taught those skills. I was a terrible, terrible communicator. Then if I had to talk to a press person, I would break out in like sweat and just be a nervous wreck. And the first time they suggested I go on to MSNBC, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I thought, this is it. This is the end of my life right here. But here's the thing, I didn't die. I'm here. And the reason is that I brought a group of people to help me learn those skill sets. So that's what this is about. You just have to know that, one, you don't need to know everything. Please do not wait to run for office or ask for that promotion until you know everything, because so much of it you learn on the job anyway. And you get good people around you, or find people who can help you with one thing and learn, and you will.
Thank you. Storytelling, and especially a candidate's personal story, is very important for any campaign. Can you tell us about a few of the candidate stories that you particularly admire?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. There are so many. You've got so many in Georgia. I could just say you probably know them all even better than me. But I talk about this in the book as well. But I often think about Congresswoman Lucy McBath's story. It, you don't have to have the same sort of. I mean, God, I hope you don't have to have any of this happen that Lucy went through, obviously. But she found a way through tragedy and great grief to not only become an activist and then run for office, but to speak out about what happened to her son and what we need to do, and to share that story, just as she was willing to share her story of surviving breast cancer. These are very, very powerful stories. I don't want you to be intimidated by the big stories, the Stacey Abrams stories of oh my gosh, where do we even begin with her growing up with two parents who were pastors, and really just start there and it just feeds itself. We don't all have those kind of, I would say, sort of almost like movie tale stories. Like you could write a movie on those two women, right? And it would be a good one and I would go watch it. But I am telling you, each and every one of you has a powerful story. And the more we're willing to share, even if we think it's an average story, like, oh, well, everybody goes through this. Well, that's even more of a reason to talk about it, because we don't always talk about what average folks are going through. Whether it's in the Black community or the Hispanic community or the white suburbs, or you name it, we have to be willing to talk about it, and then it will connect. Something in our story, I promise you, will connect. Why do we think humanity's been doing this around the fires? It's very tribal of us as human beings to share stories about ourselves and about our families. And so I really encourage each and every one of you to think through your story and work on it. Sometimes you need a little help because it can be really long and you got to kind of tighten it up, or maybe use different aspects of your story depending on what you're doing and what you're looking to do. But it is magical when someone can lay out and talk about their story, and then all of a sudden you see it. You see it in the eyes of the room you're speaking to or the individual you're talking to, that one nugget that's like, oh yeah, I've been through that too. And that's it. That's the moment. That's what ties us all together.
One very powerful story was told 30 years ago by Anita Hill when she testified in the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings. And that served as a catalyst for many women running for office. Could you reflect on that?
I can, and and I'm not sure of the age. I'm going to guess there's an age range of people engaged today, watching and in person. It's always have to be a little careful because I do recognize that there are groups of women who were not around when you and I were watching this happen and unfolding in front of us on television. But this, this moment of Anita Hill coming out and talking about the sexual harassment that she was forced to go through in an era, you got to understand, where the term barely existed. So I was in college and I didn't really even know I was about to go to college, and I didn't even know what that meant. Honestly, it just was not something we were talking about in any meaningful way. And so the power of just her voice on that one issue, let alone the inspiration of that story. I often had conversations with Senator Barbara Mikulski, who is the first Democratic woman to win a seat in the United States Senate in her own right. She was an Emily's List first candidate, actually, in 1986, started serving in 1987. So she was in the Senate when these hearings happened. And she shares the story, which I think is incredibly powerful, that people, women, particularly in Maryland, because that's where she was senator, would walk up to her and go, well, where are the women in the committee hearing? Like, where are the women senators? And Senator McCullough is like, there's only two of us in the entire Senate. We can't cover all the committees. And people didn't know. They just weren't paying attention. Now, also pre-internet, you kind of got to put yourself in that moment in history. But what happened with that one visual through television was that thousands and thousands of women got really mad, including myself, and said, we got to do something, and we got to get engaged in politics in a way that maybe we hadn't thought of doing at all. I was actually, I wouldn't say this was the singular moment of my change, but I was pre-med in college. I was all about being a doctor, and it was these series of events that included Anita Hill that actually changed my trajectory to work in Democratic politics, because it was so clear that we had to have different voices. And that particular year, 1992, they referred to as the year of the woman, because we get a whole year, everybody, 1 year, which also drove Senator Mikulski insane. She's like, it's like calling it the year of the caribou. I mean, it was really this silly concept, but we did have over 20 women take seats in the U.S. House that after that election, and 4 women in the U.S. Senate, which I know also sounds tiny, but when we only had 2, that was a pretty big jump. There are these moments, right, that this happens. Donald Trump, unfortunately, I guess I don't want to give him that much credit, was that moment for now tens of thousands of women who have signed up, even at Emily's List, saying they want to run. But here's the difference. Because we have the technology we have, the fact that I can sit in Billings, Montana, and have this conversation with you all this evening, means we can continue communicating with those women in a regular way to ensure this is not the year of the woman, but that this is a sea change moment for engagement. And that's why, as you asked one of the earlier questions, where does my optimism come from? Technology is helping us immensely to ensure that we continue those conversations, because that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Assembling the best possible campaign team is one of the most important tasks for any candidate. Please share some of the secrets you mention in the book for assembling a great campaign team.
This is critical. And by the way, it's not just for your campaign team. It's if you're running a nonprofit, if you're running a business, if you're running Georgia Win List, it's like we all need good teams around us. And to start, you really need to think through what you need on that team. Let's talk about just the camp, since we're all talking about running for office in this particular group. You need somebody who's going to run the day-to-day operation of the organization. If you're running for a smaller office, that might be a full-time volunteer. If you're running for anything a little bit larger, including legislature, you really want a campaign manager, because your job as candidate is a huge job. It is not the job of a campaign manager. The candidate is not the finance director. The candidate is not the communications director. The candidate is the candidate who has to be on all the time, who has to do the big asking for not just resources and money, but for votes. You're literally asking for the most precious thing in a democracy, a person's vote. And so you really need to have folks around you, like a manager, who can make sure all of the 10,000 details that need to be taken care of every day. Like, did the lit draft get done? Did somebody really edit the email before it went out? Who sent out the text and had a grammar error? Let's not do that again, because that's the other thing. Your team's going to make some mistakes along the way because they're human. And you got to just give a little patience. You got to use the mistake as a learning lesson and then move on. Now, if the mistake is made a couple more times, you may have to make even a harder decision, which is maybe you have the wrong person in that role, which is also part of managing a team. You got to make sure that the right people are in the role, but know that they, like you, are going to learn as they go. I wish I can say I never made a mistake as a campaign manager when I managed both John Tester and Al Franken's US Senate races. I made a few mistakes along the way. We survived them. Those guys made a few mistakes along the way too. We survived them. We had one doozy at Emily's List where, oh gosh, these things happen. This is just these things. We've had phenomenal digital staff at Emily's List for years now. But when you're moving out as much content as you start moving out in any campaign now, and particularly a national organization, it's a lot. And you cannot, I don't read every piece of direct mail that went through the hands of Emily's List that have my name on it. You got to just let it go. You got to let it go. You do not have enough hours in the day. And we had a situation where a website that was in draft format went live for just a moment, and God love them, they figured it out very, very quickly. But the Republicans are pretty smart, and they got a screenshot of it in the meantime, and we had to eat a lot of crow to get through it. It was a rough day for the team, but you know what? As a leader, and this is why I think this is really important, we use it as a learning lesson. No one got fired. No one lost their job. There were a lot of tears, I will say. Having Kleenex around, important. But we got through it, and we said, we're just not going to, what are the rules that we're going to put in place, the checklist to make sure this doesn't happen again. So look for those folks that, one, are detail oriented, but also are willing to learn just like you are as a candidate.
Good advice. And when those mistakes happen, you have to deal with the press. And that's a daunting task for many candidates. Could you share some of your advice about dealing with the press with these future candidates in the room?
The press is evolving so quickly because there is the earned media side of the press, the print press that still exists, though in some places more than others. There's the social media aspect of all of this. and of course there's the TV and all of those aspects of press. But here's the important thing when things go awry, because when things get, you're always pushing stories with everybody about you, or maybe about your opponent, to drive press. But when a crisis moment happens, when a mistake happens, or they find something, a negative attack comes in, I cannot say enough. Take a breath. Just take a breath. Get everybody together and talk through what exactly you want to do. Now, hopefully what you've done earlier is the research to know that there's something in your background that can sneak up on you. That's on the research side. And I really mean you got to do your research, or have somebody do research into your background. You think you know everything, but I got to tell you, particularly the older I get, there's stuff I completely forget. I just saw a high school friend of mine 2 days ago, and she was talking about some stories. Actually, I shouldn't share with anybody, but I was like, oh, I totally forgot that we maybe, had an illegal beer before we were of age. So I'm just saying, we've all done things, okay? We've all done things. It's important to know what those are, where the trouble spots are. So when the moment happens and it becomes public, you have a response and you're ready to go. And a lot of the best crisis moments are because your team already knew they were going to come at some point, or you got ahead of it, which I will say Stacey Abrams did beautifully with regard to her debt, her personal debt. I think it is really worth looking at how she handled that, and it actually became a positive part of her story and a relatable part of her story. That's another thing that you can do ahead of it. But let's say we make a mistake and we say something we weren't supposed to say. You just got to go back and either correct it or lean into it, depending on what the situation is. I personally, and this is actually something that I regret my after behavior. And this is why I want to share this story. When I was the campaign manager for a congressional candidate, years ago, 2 decades ago now, I did a press interview and they asked, so is he banking all this cash so he can run for Senate? Okay, while you're running for Congress, you do not suggest you're running for Senate down the road. Just a quick lesson. You have to stay focused on the race you are running today, and not, even if you maybe have a full plan to run for higher office, you run the one race you're running at the time first. Well, I basically said yes. I screwed up. It popped out of my mouth, and I screwed up. It was a bad story. I got into some trouble, but he taught me a good lesson about we all make mistakes. I did my best to soften the blow. But here's the thing about press. It goes away really fast. And what's a really painful, bad story today is going to be history tomorrow. In fact, in the world we live in, it could be history 4 hours from now, depending on what happens. So that's the other thing, is just take a breath. You'll get through.
Sometimes candidates do not always understand the need for a personal support system that is different from their paid campaign staff. And you talk about this in the book. Could you elaborate a little bit more about the kinds of personal support the candidate needs surrounding them?
I think this is really important. And I think for those that are in the room who are thinking about just managing campaigns, for campaign managers and staff, it's also really important for us to understand that candidates need this network. One of the things we talk about is you need the truth teller. You need the person who loves you unconditionally, but is also going to kind of lay it on the line. And sometimes it's just better when it's not coming from the staff person. that it's coming from somebody who you know has your back, has had your back, hopefully for years. It's often friends, but that's really helpful. I think also just having the person who's always going to be the cheerleader is important. I think the person that you can let your hair down and take your makeup off with and throw on your black yoga pants and or soft pants as they call them now, and just kick it up and have a glass of wine or have some coffee and just relax. You need that mental health space with somebody as well. So it does take a whole village of people. And I think thinking through who those folks are and understanding that's the other piece of this is you've got your circle that are there for you. Just be wary of the other circle that comes in that feels like they've all of a sudden become really great friends while you're running, but they weren't around before. They can be helpful to you, but keep an eye on what their real goal is. And I don't actually talk about this as much in the book, but I've watched this happen with a number of candidates over the year where all of a sudden their best new buddy friend is taking them out every time they're in town. And you're like, where did this person come from? And what does this person want? So, that's even actually more of a reason to have your own group of folks. Some people refer to it as a kitchen cabinet. I don't really love that term. It's fine. I think it's just people that you can count on, particularly in moments of crisis. Also, just one other thing. Don't we just need this anyway? Like, forget about running. We should all have a circle of people that we can turn to when things happen, because things happen in our lives. And also it goes both ways. We want to be part of people's circles that we can be helpful and supportive. It just makes life better. And we need to do more of that. So continue thinking about that friend circle of yours and lean on them, and know that sometimes even when you're running for office, you might have to help out a friend too.
Thank you. Very good cautionary words. The greatest fear facing many women candidates is the requirement to ask for money. The name Emily addresses the importance of early funding. So could you explain both the acronym and why early money is so crucial to a campaign?
Absolutely. Yeah. For those who don't know, that Emily is an acronym. It's not a person. It stands for early money is like yeast. It helps make the dough rise. Sometimes think there might have been some bourbon involved when they decided that name, but I love it, and it's exactly true. It is a beautiful acronym, and I need you to just get over it. You can ask for money. Honestly, this is not like you're asking for money to get your hair done. You're not asking for money to buy a new outfit. You are asking for resources, for investment. You're asking for an investment in a better future. And so why would you deny somebody the opportunity to invest in a better future? Just change your mindset about this. And then you got to start with your family first, because if you can't do that, this is going to get really, really hard. But you can do this. I know it feels daunting, but once you start getting into the flow of it, it really is just part of it. It is a huge piece of this puzzle, because we need resources and campaigns to pay for the staffing, the communications, the literature, the lawn signs. And if you're running for higher office, television ads, digital ads, all of this costs money.
The circles of influence model developed by Emily's List is now used not just by women, but by men in many political organizations as a way to prioritize and approach donors. Could you talk about the circles of influence model and its most important concepts?
Will do. And this is, Mary Jane Volk was the staffer way back when that built this all out. And in fact, my very first paid job in politics was for a candidate by the name of Mary Reeder in Minnesota. I ended up being the finance director. And it was the circles of influence and the Emily's List manual that got me through that job. So I assume you've talked about them. Is that correct through the day? And of course you start with your personal circle, you start with the family and the friends, and then you go to folks who are like-minded and have some interest in shared issues, and then you go into the groups of folks who are more transactional in the role. But that's why starting with the family and friends is good practice, because you can ask your dad or your brother. Oh my gosh, me asking my brother would be a hilarious thing, but I'd ask him if I was running, because you got to ask everybody that you know to invest in this in engagement. But really starting close and going out. And I think for some, thinking about it I think a lot of people going in think, oh, I got to get that business person to give me money. I got to go. You start on the outer edges of those circles. Do not do that. Those are hard to get. You have to build momentum to get those resources. And you build momentum by getting the early resources from folks who believe in you, who know you. I have an aunt in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, who is a Republican, God love her, and she has made it clear. She always thinks I'm running for office. I'm currently not running for office and currently have no plans to run for office. But she's made it clear, Republican or not, she's going to invest in me. So don't walk away from that family that's Republican even. Like, these are family connection and friend connections who are willing to invest in the person they know. And why? Because you have integrity. And that is more important than partisanship for the vast majority of people in this country. That's why you go to all those folks and you ignore their partisanship and you ask them to invest in you.
One of your closing chapters is called Grow a Thicker Skin, which in our current political environment is particularly relevant. Would you please share your best advice for how a candidate deals with hurtful comments?
And I wish I had a magic wand that would take this all away and make this all like a nice walk through the tulips, a tiptoe through the tulips. But that is not the world we live in, and you know that, and you've seen it. And unfortunately for women, you're likely to get even more negative attacks, which means it's more important to quickly build that thicker skin. And the way to do that, and I'm going to say easier said than done, I got it. Sometimes you just got to ignore it. Like, it's going to happen, but it's usually coming from people who are not for you no matter what anyway, because they have an agenda that is very, very different than the values you're bringing to the table. So throw them aside. Let them say what they want to say. They're mean and they don't want to get engaged in your campaign anyway. So let that go. Just, that's the way it is. And I think that's the first thing to do. We always say, don't read the comments, used to be the line. Watch what you read on the Twitter feed. Let your staff read some of that and monitor the situation. You need to talk to voters that need to be motivated to vote for you or persuaded to vote for you. It is really hard to vote or to get those voters who are absolutely opposed, not just to you, but they're just opposed to your agenda because they are of a different political persuasion. And they just sometimes get mean and nasty. And that's just the way it is. So you need to stay focused on what you need to do to win. You got to let that other stuff slide away. There is one catch in this. Spouses have a really hard time with this. So if you have a partner, it is actually more important for you to grow a thicker skin quicker, because you're going to have to keep your partner on the ground sometimes. And if you can't, that's when you go back to that network of friends or that staff and go, okay, my partner is freaking out about this ad. You have to talk to him or her, or they, like, you just have to do it. And that, because I'm telling you, I think I've had so many conversations with spouses. By the way, it doesn't really matter. Spouse is a spouse. Like, it could be a woman and could be a man. it could be undefined. They are protective of their partner. And they're the ones who have, in my opinion, thin skin, who can't find a way to thicken it fast enough. And so I'm warning you, that's why we have to get the thick skin to help them and our family member.
Now, Stephanie, I love your title for chapter 9 so much that I think it would make a great nightshirt for candidates if the words were printed in reverse, so that this haiku-like mantra would be the last thing candidates see in the mirror at night and the first thing they see the next morning. So could you share this, because a lot of people haven't gotten that far in the book, and tell us more about it?
Campaign joyfully, show gratitude deliberately, celebrate liberally. This, and I've learned this over the years, and I have fallen into this trap myself. And this is why Christina Reynolds, my co-author, and I really wanted to end on this idea, because as leaders, as candidates, as campaign managers, as leaders of organizations, everybody is looking to you for the emotional feel of the moment. And so if you can think about campaign joyfully, if you can really think about putting that smile on, even on the days where it's hard, I swear, one, it is contagious. I'm like, who wants to be on a sad sack campaign? There's no fun in that. You want to have some fun. Like, that is part of why we do this. We get to know new people, we get new friends, and you want to have some fun. Doesn't mean you're not serious, but there's a joyfulness in this work that people are looking for, that average Americans are looking for. And then just make sure you thank people and thank people again. And I don't mean broad thank yous either. I'm like, Jill, thank you so much for bringing in the pizza tonight. Or what, it's just because that personal touch is so important. And we get so busy that we forget to do that. And that one statement, that one thank you, that one moment, you can change somebody's life. And I've had that happen. I've had it happen to me. And it's really, really powerful. And the celebrate liberally. Okay, 2 factors here. There's 2 parts of this celebrate liberally. Women, sisters, we are terrible at stopping and going, we won, we did it. This is actually like, oh, we did all this work and we don't celebrate. Even for an hour, we were like, okay, what do we have to do next? Make my list. We got to start building the governing team. We got to build the office. We got to do this. We got to do that, which you do. And I appreciate that. But you got to pause, because everybody just worked their tails off to win this race. So enjoy the moment. Enjoy it and just get it in your head, because I'll tell you, if you think about the joy of the people around you at that moment, that will get you through the hard days of governing, which can be even worse than the hard days of running for office. I mean, look at the US Congress right now. You can imagine, like, look at the Georgia legislature right now. Like, these are hard jobs and you have to find solutions. So the other piece of celebrating liberally is that initial celebration, but also govern that way too. Like, really say, okay, now I'm here to make change. We're going to do it, and we're going to do it with joy in the exact same way. Because I think that is part of the celebrating liberally, is that you now get to do some things because your voice is there and you get to represent people who weren't there before. And that is pretty cool, my friends.
Thank you so much. Now, Stephanie, you mentioned Girl Scout cookies several times in the book, and we're actually eating from my personal freezer stash of Girl Scout cookies tonight in your honor.
I am so jealous right now. I am so jealous. Wait, what's your favorite? What's your favorite?
Oh, Samoas. I kept those. They're eating Thin Mint.
I'm a Thin Mint gal myself, but they're both great.
But I wanted you to share some of the lessons from your childhood that have served you well as a candidate and that would be your advice for moms who want to raise daughters who will be great future candidates and great feminists.
Oh, well, thank you for letting me talk about this, and also just honor that the beginning of Girl Scouts happened in the home state of Georgia. So, and I am a huge proponent still of the Girl Scouts because it was an let me put it this way, sort of a safe place with just like all the girls. And I know that the Boy Scouts are letting girls in now, and I can't speak to that because I don't actually know how it's working, but I can speak to Girl Scouts. And I can say as a brownie, they didn't have daisies when I started. So so I know they have daisies now. I was a brownie and I flew up for those of you who've done this, and I was a junior and even went into cadet into junior high for a while. Every step of the way, I was given opportunities to lead, but I was also given opportunities to work in a team. And so it wasn't just, of course I'm a Montana kid, so we did a lot of camping, and I can still start a fire if I need to. I can still clean a fish if I need to. I prefer not to, but I can do all those things. But the leadership skills and the team, working in a team, those sets of skills I think were really, really critical. Let alone selling cookies, which I know I didn't get it. I thought, okay, we're selling cookies so we can go to the camp this summer, right? I mean, when you're a Girl Scout, you think selling cookies is about selling cookies and maybe eating cookies. This process of selling cookies is really quite brilliant on behalf of the Girl Scouts because it, one, teaches you how to ask, which we all need to do. We need to know how to ask. And those little girls can ask grown-ups whether they'll buy another box of Thin Mints, which happened to me in a dry cleaner with a little Daisy Girl Scout that I'm quite confident is going to be an elected official someday, because she upsold me on s'mores, which cost an extra $1. Very smart. Just the other thing is it also teaches some business skills about money and money management and how you put together plans like that. So these are all really, really important skills. And for me, it was really the beginnings, the foundation of everything else I ended up doing. And I didn't even know it. So moms, I didn't even know what was going on. And I tease my dad all the time. So I tell this story in the book, but my father was the lab director at St. James Community Hospital in Butte. And I was like, oh, prime target for cookie selling. I wanted to go to the hospital and just go through the lab and ask all of the people who work for him to buy cookies. Circles of influence, go to the people who know you first. And unfortunately, he was like, you can't do that because you can't solicit in the hospital. But he says to me, I'll give you the phone list. I'll give him my phone list back there. The only way to communicate at this point in time was on a phone that had a cord with the phone on the wall. I know, ancient times. But I did. I literally called everybody who worked in the lab. They all knew me because I was up there a lot, and asked them to buy cookies. And that was game changing for me because I got over that whole fundraising fear back then. And it's what I still fundraise all the time. This is what I do. But I got over asking, are you sure you don't want one more box of Thin Mints? And then I would keep records, just as you will through your databases, where he'd be like, well, last year you bought 5 boxes of cookies, but they have this new one. And so I might want to try the new one on top of the 5. I mean, honestly, this is how you do it. And it's those early lessons in life. It also, if a Girl Scout can do that, if a little 6-year-old can do that, you too can go out there and ask for support in a vision that's going to make things better, because that's exactly what they were doing too.
We like to say in Georgia that we're currently the center of the political universe. You are looking at us from a national perspective. Are we? And if so, tell us whether you think Georgia Democrats can finish the job of turning Georgia blue in 2022, and how important will women candidates be for making that change?
Well, I should have just started with a big, gigantic thank you for delivering the United States Senate to the Democrats, because it would be, as hard as it is at 50-50, it'd be a nightmare if Mitch McConnell was, had the gavel, as we like to say, even though he's not speaker. So thank you so much. And delivering, those votes for Joe Biden. So that was a huge, huge deal. So yes, why not? Be the center of the universe. I'm not opposed to that. We do need some other places to move your direction really, really rapidly. And they are. And I believe that two things are in your favor and some other states' favor for moving forward. It is the massive amount of groundwork you've already laid down, driven by women, frankly, including Stacey Abrams, but not just, and women of all backgrounds, and the women that are running for office, particularly at the legislative and local levels, because I believe that there is no reason why we shouldn't have a woman running in every single office in this country. And when we do, in Georgia, I need you to do this go around. It drives local energy up to the top of the ticket. Like, you'll of course have the excitement at the top, but that localized volunteers, bringing new people into the system, because there are women in, and we are looking at electorates. I mean, this is a no-brainer to me. These electorates, the total electorate of so many of our states now, are 54% women, which means they're only 46% men. Think about that. And we have a gender advantage within this. So it's doubly good for us to ensure that women are on the ballot, that women are motivating volunteers, that women volunteers are driving out the vote, and that we keep on expanding the women part of this electorate. It's not that I don't want men to vote, they can vote, but we've got our job here, and we know that it works, is to energize women. So yes, I think, I'm not going to say it's easy. You got to keep fighting. It is going to be a rough, rocky year, likely, because historically, the party that's in power takes a bit of a hit in a midterm. But we have had two presidential elections in the last two that something really weird happened. I mean, truly, we can all admit something really weird happened in 16. But when I say that, what do I mean? The party that won the White House in both 16 and 20 actually lost seats in Congress. That had never happened before, ever. So there's something going on in this electorate that is making things a little bit different. And so when the pundits only talk about history of midterms, and this is the only way it ever happens, and we always lose seats, the party in power, ignore them, because the electorate right now is all over the place. And so if we do our job, which is turn out the vote, meaning give them a reason to go out and vote, not just get them to the polls. You got to give reasons, even for our base Democrats, to get out and vote. Yes, you can elect a Democrat governor. You can throw out all those, I was going to say something inappropriate. I'm not going to do that. You need to change who is running your state badly, because you're also the center of the universe for a bad reason right now. Like, you've got like the good reason, which is 2020, and then you got this legislature and this governor and this attorney general and secretary of state, and that's the bad reason. And so we got to do that, and know that you're going to have a lot of friends around the country who want to see that changed.
Thank you. We like to say that the women we're training with WLA and boot camps are the rising tide that will lift all Democratic votes in Georgia. Let's wrap up by giving you the opportunity for some parting words for our Georgia audience of activists and future candidates.
Well, first off, thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really, truly honored to be here. But thank you, each of you, who already took a gigantic step. I mean, for decades, the hardest step for a woman to take was even being willing to think about running for office. You've already taken that big old step. Now it's just a matter of figuring out which office and going. And you've got good network right now where you are, and growing fast. And so I just encourage you to not just take that step and put your name on the ballot, but also help each other. We cannot do this alone. It takes an entire universe of strong women and good men who will stand with us to get this done. And so I am just, thank you, each of you, for taking this step. We need this now more than ever. You know it, I know it, you can feel it out there. Our democracy is very shaky. We did a very big thing in 2020, but we are far from done. And it is going to take the energy from grassroots and candidates running for local office to get us where we need to go in every state. And Georgia, counting on you. Got to keep leading the way. I mean, you delivered the Senate. Now you got to go. You got to keep it and take over that state.
We are grateful Stephanie took the time to be with our WLA class earlier this week, and certainly hope you have enjoyed this glance into our training program and what it takes to run for office. While we are actively recruiting for legislative candidates in 2022, there are also more than 1,000 important municipal and school board elections on the ballot this fall around the state. Please think about whether one of these offices might be a good fit for you. And if not you, think about who in your circle might be a great candidate, and please share this program with them. While we only endorse for statewide and legislative offices at WinList, we are always happy to talk with and encourage potential candidates for any office, because we know progressive voices need to be represented at every level of government. Please reach out to us if we can be helpful in your discernment process. We have shifted our schedule for Women in the News programs to one prompted by news events or topics of interest which deserve an in-depth examination. We would love to hear from our audience about subjects you wish to see future programs focus on. And trust us, reapportionment is at the top of our list for a July program. You might send suggestions to info@georgiawinlist.com. Georgia WinList depends upon the generous support of our donor network to continue our important work to change the face of power by electing more women to legislative seats and statewide office. Your contributions to our annual giving circles support our work to finish the job of turning Georgia blue in 2022. Georgia's political landscape can and will shift with your generous support. Please help us build an audience for Women in the News by sharing today's program with a friend or two, and have them join our network. Programs are archived on our Facebook page, website, and YouTube channel. Stay informed about our exciting work by following Georgia WinList across all your preferred social media platforms for a perspective you might not see elsewhere. Thanks for joining us today. Please stay safe, and best wishes for a great July 4th holiday weekend.